The crystal chandeliers of the Metropolitan Grand Ballroom dripped light onto 1,000 champagne flutes. But for Ava Lennox, the only illumination that mattered was the warm spotlight on her husband. Julian Cross, a man sculpted from ambition and Savile Row suits, was at the podium, charming the city's elite into funding his latest philanthropic venture. Ava, seated at the head table, rested a hand on the gentle swell of her 7-month pregnancy, a secret smile playing on her lips. Then he introduced his star protégé, Mila Kerr. And as the applause thundered, under the guise of a congratulatory embrace, Julian's lips found Mila's in a kiss that was anything but paternal. The camera flashes were like lightning, and in that blinding white, Ava's world shattered. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of money and hothouse hydrangeas. It was the kind of atmosphere Ava had learned to navigate with a practiced ease that felt like a performance. A world away from her days sketching blueprints in a cramped university studio. A life she now recalled with a strange, bittersweet nostalgia. She had been an architect of rising acclaim, a woman who saw the world in lines, structures, and possibilities. Then she met Julian Cross, a man who built empires not with steel and glass, but with binary code and sheer force of will. He hadn't just entered her life, he'd annexed it, his gravitational pull so immense that her own ambitions had quietly begun to orbit his until they were all but eclipsed. Tonight was the pinnacle of his latest achievement, the Lumina Foundation Gala, a charity he'd founded to bring tech education to underserved youth. It was a noble cause, and it looked spectacular on the cover of Forbes. From her seat at the head table, a position of honor that felt more like a display case, Ava watched him. He was a modern-day king surveying his court, his voice a rich baritone that could sell sand in the desert. He'd kissed her before leaving for the stage, a brief dry press of lips. "Wish me luck," he'd murmured, his eyes already scanning the room, focused on his audience, not on her. A familiar pang of distance, one she'd been expertly ignoring for months, pricked at her heart. She'd told herself it was just the pressure of the launch, the weight of his empire. She smoothed the silk of her custom maternity gown over her belly, feeling the soft, rolling kick of their baby. Noah Lennox, she thought, a name they'd chosen together on a rare, quiet Sunday that now felt a lifetime away. Your father is quite the showman. He commanded the stage, weaving a narrative of hope and innovation that was impossible to resist. He was selling a dream, and this room was full of buyers. "And none of this would be possible," Julian was saying, his smile catching the light, "without the tireless work of my team. In particular, I want to bring up the project lead, a mind as brilliant as she is dedicated. Please, a huge round of applause for Mila Kerr." Ava clapped along with everyone else, her smile genuine, if a little tired. She knew Mila. A whip-smart analyst in her mid-20s from Aura Dynamics, Julian's tech behemoth. Mila was a frequent fixture in their lives, a constant presence at their sterile, art-filled penthouse for late-night strategy sessions that Ava was tacitly expected to provide coffee for, but not participate in. Ava had always found her a little too eager, her gaze lingering on Julian a second too long, but she'd dismissed it as the hero worship of an ambitious subordinate. "I was so naive," a voice would whisper in her mind, much, much later. So willfully blind, Mila ascended the stage, a vision in emerald silk that clung to her like a second skin. She was flushed with success, her gaze fixed solely on Julian with an unnerving intensity. He met her at the podium, taking her hand. The crowd roared its approval. He leaned in to whisper something in her ear, a gesture of a proud mentor. Ava felt another kick from Noah, this one sharper, more insistent, as if sensing the atmospheric shift she was trying to deny. Then it happened. In the split second between the peak of the applause and the blinding volley of camera flashes from the press pit, Julian's congratulatory hug became something else entirely. He cupped the back of Mila's head, his fingers sinking into her elaborate updo, and pressed his lips to hers. It wasn't a fleeting peck on the cheek. It was a kiss, a deep, possessive, undeniable kiss, captured for eternity in 100 strobing bursts of light. Time seemed to warp, to thicken like honey. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of the crowd, the orchestral music, it all receded into a dull, distant hum. The only thing Ava could see, the only thing that was real, was the tableau on stage. Her husband, the father of her unborn child, kissing another woman in front of the entire world. A collective gasp, sharp and sudden, sucked the air from the room. A woman at a nearby table, a rival of Julian's whom Ava had always detested, covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horrified glee. For a heartbeat, Ava was paralyzed. Her mind, an architect's mind built on logic and reason, refused to process the image. It had to be a mistake, a trick of the light, an awkward angle. But the way Mila's hand rested on Julian's chest, the way his body angled possessively towards hers, there was no misunderstanding this. This was a truth as solid and brutal as concrete. Betrayal was a cold, physical thing. It started in her stomach, a knot of ice that spread through her veins, chilling her to the bone. The baby kicked again, a frantic, panicked tattoo against her ribs, as if he too could feel his world tilting off its axis. The kiss ended. Julian pulled back, his expression a flicker of pure panic before the mask of cool control slammed back into place. Mila looked dazed, her lipstick slightly smeared, her eyes glassy. They stood apart, suddenly 2 feet of empty space between them screaming louder than the kiss itself. The silence in the ballroom was a living entity, vast and suffocating. It pressed in on Ava, on everyone. Something inside Ava, some carefully constructed load-bearing wall, snapped. The years of quiet accommodation, of sublimating her own identity for his, of being the perfect, supportive wife. It all incinerated in a blaze of white-hot fury. She wasn't just a spectator in this drama, she was a principal, and they had just handed her a live microphone. With a grace she didn't know she possessed, she rose from her chair. The heavy silk of her maternity gown swayed around her. Every eye in the room swiveled from the stage to her. She could feel their pity, their morbid curiosity, their judgment. She ignored it all. Her focus was singular. She walked towards the stage, her steps even and deliberate. A security guard moved to intercept her, his expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. He put a hand out. "Ma'am?" Ava didn't even look at him. She looked past him, at Julian, who saw her coming. His eyes were wide, pleading, warning, commanding her to stop, to sit down, to not make a scene. She walked right past the guard as if he were a ghost. She walked past her husband, her gaze fixed on the podium where the master of ceremonies had left his microphone just moments before. Her hand closed around the cool metal. It felt heavy, a scepter of newfound terrible power. She turned to face the stunned, silent crowd. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the cathedral of silence. She cleared her throat. The sound echoed through the vast hall. She looked at Julian, whose face was now a mask of rage and terror. She looked at Mila, who looked small and lost. Then her eyes swept across the hundreds of faces staring up at her. "Good evening," she said, her voice miraculously clear and steady. "It seems my husband, in his excitement, made a small omission in his thank yous." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, each one a perfectly placed stone dropping into a silent pool. She saw Julian take a step toward her, his mouth opening to say something, anything. She held up a hand, a gesture of such authority that it stopped him cold. "He forgot to thank his other partner tonight," Ava continued, her voice ringing with a chilling clarity. "The one who has been with him not just on this project, but for the last 10 years. She let her gaze drift down to her swollen belly, a deliberate, theatrical gesture. She then looked back up, her eyes finding the lens of the lead photographer in the press pit. And he forgot to thank his unborn child. She placed the microphone gently back on the stand. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply turned and walked off the stage, down the steps, and through the parted sea of gawking socialites. The silence held until the grand ballroom doors swung shut behind her, and then the dam of whispers finally broke into a roar. The cold night air hit Ava like a physical blow, a welcome shock after the suffocating heat of the ballroom. The cacophony of her own thoughts was louder than the distant Manhattan traffic. The image of the kiss was seared onto the back of her eyelids, a permanent, ugly brand. He kissed her. He kissed her. He kissed her. The phrase looped, a mantra of misery. Her hand went instinctively to her phone. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through her contacts, past Julian, husband, with a visceral flinch. She found the name she was looking for. Harper Ellis. Harper wasn't just her best friend. She was her anchor to the woman she'd been before Julian, a fiercely intelligent, no-nonsense litigation lawyer who saw the world in facts and evidence, not the gauzy illusions Ava had been living in. Harper answered on the second ring. "Ava, what's wrong? You sound—" "I need you," Ava choked out, the words cracking. The composure she'd brandished like a shield on stage was crumbling. Can you come get me? I'm at the Met Grand." "I'm on my way." There was no hesitation, no barrage of questions, just the solid, unwavering certainty of a true friend. Harper had never fully trusted Julian, a sentiment she'd voiced gently early on but had dropped at Ava's defensive insistence. The memory of that now felt like another betrayal, one she had inflicted upon herself. Ava waited on the curb, ignoring the curious glances of the valets. She felt strangely disconnected from her own body, as if she were watching a scene from a movie. The pregnant wife, abandoned on a sidewalk in a couture gown. It was all so pathetic, so cliché. A black SUV pulled up, and Harper jumped out of the passenger seat, her face etched with a mixture of fury and concern. "Get in," Harper said, her arm wrapping around Ava's shoulders, guiding her into the warm interior. "Don't say a word until we're moving." As the car pulled away from the curb, a frantic Julian burst through the ballroom doors, his eyes scanning the street like a predator. He saw their vehicle, his face a mess of desperation. He shouted her name, the sound swallowed by the city. Ava didn't look back. She stared straight ahead, watching the glittering skyline blur through the tears she hadn't realized were falling. The sanctuary of Harper's Upper West Side apartment was a world away from the cold, minimalist expanse of the penthouse Ava shared with Julian. Harper's place was cluttered with law books, overflowing bookshelves, and the faint, comforting scent of coffee and old paper. It was real. It was a home. Harper handed her a glass of water and sat opposite her on a worn leather sofa. "Okay," she said softly, her lawyerly intensity tempered with deep affection. "Tell me exactly what happened." Ava recounted the story in a monotone, the words feeling foreign and rehearsed. The speech, the introduction, the kiss, the microphone. As she spoke, the numbness began to recede, replaced by wave after wave of nauseating pain. "He did it, in front of everyone," she whispered, the reality of the public humiliation crashing down on her. "All those people, his board members, our friends." "They're not your friends if they're his friends," Harper said, her tone sharp but not unkind. "And screw his board members. The only people who matter right now are you and that baby." Just then, Ava's phone began to buzz incessantly. Julian. 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 A text message flashed on the screen, a follow-up to the missed calls. "Ava, pick up the phone. We need to talk. This is a huge misunderstanding. You're being hormonal and emotional. You completely overreacted. Don't do this." Hormonal. The word was a lit match on a trail of gasoline. The raw grief momentarily gave way to a towering rage. "A misunderstanding?" she said, her voice shaking with fury as she showed the text to Harper. He thinks a tongue down another woman's throat is a misunderstanding? Classic narcissist, Harper muttered, her eyes dark. Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. He's not sorry he did it. He's sorry he got caught. He's sorry you blew up his carefully curated image. The front door of the apartment buzzed, a loud, jarring sound that made Ava jump. Harper checked the intercom, her expression hardening. Speak of the devil. Don't let him in! Ava pleaded, panic seizing her. The thought of facing him now, in his self-righteous anger, was unbearable. I wasn't planning on it, Harper said, pressing the talk button. What do you want, Julian? His voice, tinny and distorted through the speaker, was laced with an uncharacteristic desperation. Harper, please, I just need to talk to my wife. She doesn't want to talk to you, Harper replied flatly. Don't you dare speak for her! Ava, I know you can hear me. Open the door! We are married. You are carrying my child. My child. Not our child. The possessive pronoun was a dagger. He saw her, he saw the baby, as extensions of himself. Possessions to be managed. Go home, Julian, Ava said, her voice surprisingly strong as she leaned towards the intercom. There's nothing left to say tonight. There was a moment of shocked silence, then the sound of his fist banging against the solid wood of the door. Ava, don't you dare walk away from me! Do you have any idea what you've done? You've embarrassed me! You've jeopardized everything! The entitlement, the sheer audacity of his words, was staggering. In that moment, something shifted irrevocably in Ava. The pain was still there, a gaping wound, but a fragile layer of steel was beginning to form around it. She wasn't just a victim. She was a woman who had been pushed too far. Leave, she said again, her voice like ice. They heard him curse, a string of vile words, followed by the sound of retreating footsteps and a final, frustrated kick to the door. Harper let out a long breath. Okay, she said, turning back to Ava. Phase 1 is over. He knows he can't bully his way in here. Now comes the hard part. Ava looked at her friend, her eyes filled with a terrifying, uncertain future. What's the hard part? Deciding what you're going to do next, Harper said, her gaze unwavering, and taking back your life, piece by piece. Ava spent the night in Harper's guest room, a small, cozy space that felt like a fortress. She didn't sleep. She lay awake, one hand on her belly, feeling the steady, rhythmic movements of her son. With every kick, she felt a growing resolve. This wasn't just about her anymore. She had to be strong for him. She had to build a world for him that wasn't founded on lies and shadowed by betrayal. She thought about the life she had built with Julian, the lavish parties, the international travel, the penthouse that felt more like a museum than a home. It was a beautiful, gilded cage, and she hadn't even realized she was trapped until the door had been blown clean off its hinges. The morning light crept through the blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Ava sat up. The grief was still there, a heavy cloak, but underneath it, a tiny, unfamiliar spark ignited. It felt like anger. It felt like determination. It felt like the architect she used to be, looking at the rubble of a demolished building and starting to sketch the blueprints for something new, something stronger, something that was entirely her own. The next 48 hours were a blur of digital fallout. The Gala mic drop became a viral sensation. Grainy cell phone videos of Ava's speech were everywhere, juxtaposed with high-resolution photos of the kiss. News headlines screamed, "Cross-Empire shaken by scandal." Pregnant wife's speech stuns elite. Julian's PR machine went into overdrive, issuing a statement that was a masterpiece of corporate spin. It spoke of a profound personal misunderstanding, immense pressure, and requested privacy during this difficult time for our family. The subtext was clear. Ava was unstable, her actions the result of pregnancy-induced hysterics. Mila Kerr had vanished. Her social media was deactivated, her phone disconnected. She was a ghost, erased from the narrative Julian was desperately trying to control. From the quiet sanctuary of Harper's apartment, Ava watched it all unfold with a sickening detachment. Harper acted as a gatekeeper, fielding calls from Julian's lawyers, his panicked mother who alternated between blaming Ava for the scene and Mila for the affair, and reporters offering six-figure sums for an exclusive interview. Ava's instructions were simple. Say nothing. Her silence, Harper advised, was her most potent weapon. He's trying to paint you as the crazy, hormonal wife, Harper said, scrolling through a newsfeed on her laptop. It's a classic misogynistic defense. We're not going to engage. We're going to build a case. A case for what? Ava asked, her voice hollow. For your freedom, Harper replied, her eyes flashing. For your future. Ava, you need to understand the power imbalance here. Julian has controlled the finances, the narrative, your entire life for years. We need to untangle you from him, legally and financially. Did you sign a prenup? Ava nodded numbly. Yes, when we got married. I didn't even read it properly. I was in love. I thought it was just a formality, something his father insisted on. Of course you did, Harper sighed. Let me guess. He told you it was to protect his family's assets, but that he'd always take care of you. Ava's silence was answer enough. The memory of that conversation was painfully clear. They were in his sleek, minimalist apartment, years before the penthouse. He'd slid the thick document across the glass table. It's just paper, Ava, he'd said, his hand covering hers. You and I, what we have, is real. This is just to make the old guard happy. She had signed it without a second thought, high on love and the shared dream of their future. I need a copy of that prenup, Harper said, her voice all business. And I need you to start thinking. About everything. Bank accounts, assets, properties. Any conversations you remember about business deals. He co-mingled your lives. It's highly likely he co-mingled his funds. That's our way in. The task felt monumental. For 10 years, her life had been a seamless tapestry woven with Julian's. Where did he end and she begin? In the quiet moments, when Harper was at work, she found herself drifting back. She remembered the specific project she gave up for him. It was a chance to join a prestigious firm in Chicago, to work on a groundbreaking museum design. Julian had been on the cusp of securing his first round of major funding for Aura. I need you here, Ava, he'd pleaded. This is our moment. Once Aura takes off, you can build anything you want. I'll fund it myself. It was another promise, another dream he'd sold her, that she had willingly bought. She began to see a pattern in the past, a slow, insidious erosion. Honey, you don't need to work, I've got this. Let my financial guys handle our investments. You shouldn't have to worry about it. This party is important for us. Can you push back your deadline? Each one seemed reasonable at the time, a small sacrifice for their shared future. But cumulatively, they had dismantled her independence, leaving her utterly dependent on the man who had just shattered their future. A week after the gala, a package arrived, delivered by a high-end courier. It was from Julian. Inside was not a letter of apology, but a velvet box containing a breathtaking diamond necklace, the kind of ostentatious bauble he used to placate her after a missed anniversary or a cruel remark. There was also a note, written on his heavy, embossed personal stationery. My dearest Ava, I know you're hurting, and I am profoundly sorry for the pain this situation has caused. My actions were inexcusable, a terrible lapse in judgment under immense professional strain. Mila meant nothing. It was a moment of madness. This necklace is a small token of my regret, but my real apology will be the rest of my life, which I want to spend making this up to you and our son. Please come home. We can fix this. We are a family. I love you. Yours always, Julian. It was a carefully crafted performance of remorse, but Ava could now see the architecture of his manipulation. The blame shifted to professional strain, the dismissal of Mila as nothing, a convenient erasure of another human being, the bribe of the necklace, and the final cloying appeal to family. She looked at the diamonds, cold and glittering. They weren't a symbol of love. They were a price tag. The price of her silence, her compliance, her forgiveness. That afternoon, she did something she hadn't done in years. She retrieved her old portfolio case from storage in Harper's spare closet. Opening it was like opening a time capsule. Inside were her architectural drawings, her sketches, her ambitious designs for sustainable urban housing and community centers. The paper was crisp, the ink bold. Here was the woman she used to be, passionate, creative, independent, a woman who built things. She spread the blueprints across Harper's dining table. The lines were clean, the concepts innovative. She saw her own potential reflected in them, a potential she had allowed Julian to bury. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in her chest. But for the first time, she felt a flicker of her old self. The architect, the builder. She took Julian's note and the velvet box. She repackaged them and sent them back via courier, with a single item of her own enclosed. A high-quality scan of the napkin on which she had sketched the layout for his first office, all those years ago. There was no note. The message was clear. I remember who I was. I remember what I contributed. I am not for sale. That evening, she and Harper sat down with the prenup, which Harper had finally obtained through a formal request. Harper's red pen flew across the pages, circling clauses, making notes in the margins. It's a monster, just as I expected, Harper said grimly. It's ironclad. It essentially walls off all of Aura Dynamics' profits and any assets he held before the marriage. It leaves you with a one-time payout and the penthouse, which, by the way, is technically owned by a shell corporation. Ava's heart sank. So I have nothing. Not nothing, Harper corrected, her eyes gleaming with a predatory legal light. But not nearly what you're owed as his partner for a decade. The payout is insulting, but, she tapped a section with her pen, there's a lifestyle clause. It guarantees you will be maintained in the lifestyle to which you have become accustomed. That's subjective and open to interpretation. And there's this. She pointed to another clause, one Ava had never noticed. The infidelity clause. It was standard, almost boilerplate. In the event of documented adultery, the terms of the settlement could be renegotiated. The gala wasn't just a humiliation, Ava, Harper said, a slow, grim smile spreading across her face. It was evidence. Hundreds of witnesses and high-resolution photos. He didn't just break your heart. He voided his own contract. Suddenly, the path forward, while still terrifying, became clearer. This wasn't just about emotional survival anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming what was hers. And there's something else, Harper said, her voice dropping. That professional strain he mentioned in his note? I did some digging. Aura Dynamics is about to launch their biggest project ever, a new OS called Janus. It's supposed to revolutionize everything. But there are rumors on the street. Rumors that the tech is buggy, that they're bleeding cash to fix it, that Julian has leveraged everything, personally and professionally, on its success. The pieces began to click into place. The pressure, the desperation, the recklessness. He's not just fighting for his marriage, Ava realized, a cold dread mixing with her resolve. He's fighting for his empire. Exactly, Harper confirmed. And a messy, public divorce, especially one where his ex-partner might have a claim to a piece of the company she helped start, that could spook his investors. It could bring the whole house of cards down. The power dynamic, which had felt so impossibly skewed, had just shifted, ever so slightly, in her favor. Julian had built a gilded cage for her, but in his arrogance, he had just handed her the key. The first shot was fired not with a headline, but with a quiet, formal legal filing. Ava Lennox versus Julian Cross. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Harper's team filed it at the close of business on a Friday, ensuring it would hit the press on Monday morning, a controlled detonation. The grounds were simple: irreconcilable differences, citing the now infamous infidelity clause in their prenuptial agreement. Julian's response was swift and brutal. His legal team, a phalanx of silver-haired sharks from a top-tier firm led by a notorious lawyer named Ethan Ward, filed a counter-motion to seal the proceedings, citing his right to privacy and accusing Ava of attempting to leverage the situation for an exorbitant and punitive financial gain. They painted her as a vindictive gold digger, her mic drop moment not an act of a wounded wife, but a calculated theatrical performance. "He's trying to bury us in paperwork and bleed us dry with legal fees," Harper explained, pacing her office, which had become Ava's war room. "It's a classic Goliath tactic. He thinks you'll run out of money or resolve." "He's wrong," Ava said. Her voice was quiet, but it held a new tensile strength. The past few weeks had been a crucible, burning away the dross of her old life. She had established a routine. Morning prenatal yoga to connect with her body and the baby. Hours spent with Harper and her legal team, learning the language of discovery and depositions. And in the evenings, she would unroll her old blueprints, not just looking at them, but reworking them, updating them with new ideas, new materials. It was more than a hobby. It was a reclamation of her mind. The first face-to-face meeting took place in a sterile conference room, halfway between their respective lawyers' offices. It was neutral ground, a legal Switzerland. Ava saw Julian for the first time since the gala. He looked thinner, the skin stretched taut over his cheekbones. His expensive suit couldn't hide the shadows under his eyes. When his gaze met hers across the polished mahogany table, she saw not love or remorse, but a cold, reptilian fury. He saw her not as his wife, but as a hostile variable in a critical equation, a threat to his empire. Ava had prepared for this. She had visualized it with Harper, rehearsed her own composure. She gave him a slight neutral nod, her expression unreadable. Her calm seemed to unnerve him more than any outburst would have. His lead attorney, Ethan Ward, led the charge. "Mr. Cross is prepared to be generous, Ava," he began, using her first name with a practiced, paternalistic air that set her teeth on edge. "He is willing to honor the original terms of the prenup, with a significant upward adjustment as a gesture of goodwill." Harper scoffed. "A gesture of goodwill? Your client publicly humiliated his pregnant wife, an act that has caused immeasurable emotional distress and damage to her reputation. He violated the contract. We are not interested in his goodwill. We are interested in a fair and equitable division of the marital assets, including a valuation of Ms. Lennox's early contributions to the founding of Aura Dynamics." Ethan Ward laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "That's absurd. A pittance of seed money from a girlfriend 20 years ago does not entitle her to a stake in a multi-billion-dollar corporation." "It wasn't a pittance, it was her entire inheritance," Harper countered, sliding a file across the table. "And here are the original napkin sketches for the first office, along with time-stamped emails from that era where Mr. Cross himself refers to her as his co-founder and partner in crime. We believe a jury will find that very compelling." Ava watched Julian's jaw tighten. He remembered. She saw it in the flicker of his eyes. He had forgotten that she had kept everything. She was an architect. She archived her life. The negotiation stalled. Julian's strategy was clear: drag it out, make it painful, and hope she would break. But something unexpected happened. An email appeared in Harper's inbox from an anonymous, encrypted address. Subject: Janus. The source code is a mess. He's been using shell corporations to pay consultants who are fixing the bugs off the books, hiding the true cost from the board. One of those consultants is Mila Kerr. He didn't fire her. He just moved her to a different payroll. Check the financials for Project Nightingale. There was no signature, no way to trace the sender. "My God," Harper breathed, reading the email over Ava's shoulder. "If this is true, this is fraud. Wire fraud. Securities fraud. He's not just lying to you. He's lying to his shareholders and his board of directors. It's her, Ava said instantly. Mila, it has to be. Mila Kerr had not been erased after all. She had been hidden. Julian had paid for her silence and her continued work, believing her loyalty or her ambition could be bought. But he had miscalculated. He had shown her exactly what he did with women he no longer had a use for. He humiliated them and cast them aside. He had shown Mila her own future. This is our leverage, Harper said, her mind racing. This is the key that unlocks everything, but it's anonymous. We can't use it in court without a source. Then we find her, Ava said, her resolve hardening. We need to find Mila Kerr. Finding Mila was like hunting a ghost. But Ava had an idea. She remembered Mila mentioning her younger sister, a student at NYU. It was a long shot, a detail gleaned from a long-forgotten conversation at a company picnic years ago. Ava, however, remembered everything. Leaving Harper to the legal trenches, Ava took a cab to the NYU campus. It was a world away from the gleaming towers of Midtown. It was young, vibrant, and real. Using the university's online directory, she found a contact email for Chloe Calloway. She wrote a simple, non-threatening message. Chloe, my name is Ava Lennox. I know this is a strange request, but I believe your sister, Mila, may be in a difficult situation. I'm not looking for a fight. I'm looking for the truth. I think we might be able to help each other. If she's willing to talk, she knows how to ensure it's confidential. It was a message in a bottle, cast into a digital ocean. For 2 days, there was nothing. Ava began to think it was a mistake. Then a new encrypted email arrived. Subject, Ria Janus. A coffee shop in Brooklyn. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone! The meeting was tense. The coffee shop was a small, hip establishment filled with freelancers and students. Mila sat in a corner booth, hunched over a laptop. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman on the stage. She was pale, wearing no makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked haunted and paranoid, her eyes darting towards the door. Thank you for meeting me, Ava began, sitting opposite her, placing her hands on the table where Mila could see them. I'm not doing this for you, Mila said, her voice brittle, refusing to meet Ava's eyes. I'm doing this for me. He ruined my life. He lied to you, Ava said, not as an accusation, but as a statement of shared fact. Mila finally looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and shame. He promised me everything. He said you two were basically separated, that the marriage was just for appearances until the Janus launch was over. He said he was trapped. He said he loved me. The last words were a bitter whisper. He told me you were a brilliant, once-in-a-generation mind, Ava countered quietly. He also told me I was the love of his life. Julian builds realities to suit his needs. We were just living in different ones. He told me you were fragile, Mila confessed, looking down at her hands. Needy. That you didn't understand the pressures he was under. He said you held him back from his true potential. And what do you think now? Ava asked gently. Mila gave a short, mirthless laugh. I think he's a user, and I think he's dangerous. When the Gala blew up, he didn't apologize. He blamed me for being too conspicuous. Then he threatened me. Told me if I ever spoke about Janus, or our arrangement, he'd make sure I was blacklisted from the tech industry forever. He can't silence both of us, Ava said. If you're willing to come forward, my lawyer can offer you full immunity and protection. Your testimony about the financial fraud, about Project Nightingale, would be irrefutable. Mila hesitated, the fear warring with her anger. What do I get out of it? You get your life back, Ava replied. You get to stop looking over your shoulder. You get to be the brilliant analyst Julian once claimed you were, not his dirty little secret. You get to expose him for what he is. Ava slid a business card across the table. Harper's card. The choice is yours, but his empire is built on lies, and buildings built on faulty foundations always, eventually, collapse. Ava left the coffee shop and walked out into the crisp autumn air. She didn't know what Mila would do, but as she placed a hand on her belly, where Noah was now a constant, reassuring presence, she felt a profound sense of peace. She was no longer just reacting to Julian's actions. She was building her own case, laying her own foundation, designing her own future. She had become the architect of her own war, and for the first time since the gala, she believed she could win. Mila Kerr made her choice. 3 days after the coffee shop meeting, she walked into Harper Ellis's office with her lawyer and a laptop containing Julian's corporate time bomb. There were spreadsheets detailing off-ledger payments, hidden ledgers for Project Nightingale, incriminating emails, and secret recordings of conversations with Julian, where he detailed the scheme to hide Janus's flaws and defraud his investors. It was a nuclear bomb, and Harper had the launch codes. Harper's strategy was precise and devastating. She didn't leak the information to the press, which would be chaotic. Instead, she arranged a private meeting with 2 specific members of the Aura Dynamics Board of Directors, the 2 known for their rigid ethics and low tolerance for risk. In a sterile boardroom high above the city, she presented them with a courtesy preview of the evidence Mila was prepared to deliver to the Securities and Exchange Commission. The fallout was instantaneous and catastrophic for Julian. The board convened an emergency meeting that same night. Faced with irrefutable proof of financial misconduct and the threat of a federal investigation that could crater the company's stock value, they acted to save the company from its creator. Julian Cross was summarily dismissed as CEO of Aura Dynamics, effective immediately. He was forced to sell back his controlling shares at a significantly reduced price to cover the internal investigation's costs. He was locked out of the building he had built, his name scrubbed from the company website by dawn. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, a clean corporate press release that sent shockwaves through the financial world. It cited leadership transitions and a renewed commitment to transparent governance. The real story, of course, bled out through anonymous sources. The stories of the gala, the affair, and now the fraud all coalesced into a single, damning narrative. Julian Cross was not just an adulterer. He was a cheat in every sense of the word. His reputation, the currency he valued above all else, was irrevocably destroyed. Stripped of his title, his company, and his power, Julian was a king in exile. The legal battle for the divorce, which he had fought with such arrogance, was now his only remaining battlefield. But he was no longer a Goliath. He was just a man, exposed and vulnerable. His lawyers, recognizing the shift in leverage, pushed for a quick settlement. The new offer was a world away from the first. It gave Ava everything she was entitled to, and more. The penthouse was signed over to her, free and clear. A substantial portion of Julian's remaining personal assets, including a diversified investment portfolio, was transferred to a trust for her and Noah. The insulting one-time payout was replaced with a lifetime alimony agreement that truly reflected the lifestyle clause, and most importantly, a section was added acknowledging her foundational role in the company's early days, a moral victory that meant more to Ava than any dollar amount. Ava signed the papers in Harper's office, her hand steady. It wasn't a moment of triumphant celebration, but one of quiet, solemn closure. The war was over. She had won, but the victory felt heavy. The cost measured in years of lost identity and a broken heart. 2 months later, in the calm, sterile environment of a hospital delivery room, Ava gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Noah Lennox. She gave him her name. He was her future, not an extension of a broken past. Holding him for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapping around hers, she felt a love so pure and overwhelming it washed away the last vestiges of bitterness towards Julian. He was no longer a monster in her mind. He was just a sad, flawed man who had lost his way, the distant father of her son. Ava didn't stay in the penthouse. It held too many ghosts in its minimalist, echoing rooms. She sold it, using the funds to purchase a beautiful, neglected brownstone in Brooklyn, not far from where she had met Mila. It was a project. It had good bones, but needed a complete overhaul. It needed an architect. The next year was one of quiet, joyful construction. She supervised the renovation herself, her baby boy strapped to her chest in a carrier, gurgling happily as his mother pointed out where new walls would go, where skylights would open up the space to the sun. It was often lonely. There were nights when the baby was finally asleep, and the silence of the house felt enormous. In those moments, she grieved not for Julian, but for the family she thought she would have. Yet with each stud she saw framed in each wall that went up, she was building not just a house, but a fortress of her own making. She reopened her own firm, Lennox Architecture. Starting small, taking on projects that mattered to her, a community library, a pro bono design for a women's shelter. Her work was celebrated for its heart and ingenuity. She was building a life, one brick, one blueprint at a time. She heard about Julian sporadically. He had avoided jail time by cooperating with the SEC investigation into his own company, but his fortune was decimated, his name a pariah in the business world. He had retreated to a smaller, inherited property upstate, living a life of quiet obscurity that would have once been his worst nightmare. One crisp autumn afternoon, almost 2 years after the gala, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Ava, it's Julian." His voice was different. The booming confidence was gone, replaced by a quiet, hesitant tone she'd never heard before. Ava paused, her heart giving a single, hard thump. She sat down on the steps of her nearly finished brownstone. "Julian, I know I have no right to call you," he began, the words tumbling out. I saw an article about your new firm, The Shelter. It looked beautiful. It looked like you." "It is," she said simply. There was a long silence on the line. She could hear him take a shaky breath. "I was so lost, Ava," he said, his voice cracking. "I built this whole world on the idea that I had to be the biggest, the most powerful. I thought that was what made me worthy. Of success. Of you. I was running from the fear that I was nothing without it. And in the end, I destroyed everything. I destroyed us. I lied to you. I humiliated you, and I am so sorry. It's a pathetic, late, useless apology, but I needed to say it." Ava listened. The apology wasn't for her, not really. It was for him. It was a step in his own redemption. And she found, to her surprise, that she could accept it without sacrificing any part of her own hard-won peace. "Thank you for saying it, Julian," she said, her voice gentle. "Could I, maybe, see him?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Noah, I'll do whatever you want. Supervised, a park, just for a few minutes. I want to see my son." Ava looked out the large, newly installed window of her office at the plans for her next project spread across her desk. Downstairs, she could hear Noah laughing as her nanny played with him. Her world was full. It was safe. It was hers. The architect in her knew that some structures are too damaged to be repaired. You have to tear them down and build something new. But she also knew that forgiveness wasn't about rebuilding the old, but about clearing the ground for the future. "Okay, Julian," she said, a decision solidifying in her heart. "We can arrange that." He was Noah's father. He could not be her husband. But perhaps, in time, he could learn to be that. His path to redemption was his own to walk. But she would not be the gatekeeper who barred him from his son. Her own structure was sound. It was strong enough to withstand anything. Ava's story isn't just about the fall of a millionaire. It's about the rise of a woman who refused to be a footnote in her own life. From the ashes of a spectacular betrayal, she didn't just rebuild, she redesigned her entire world on her own terms. She traded a gilded cage for a home with a foundation of self-respect, proving that true power isn't about the name on a skyscraper, but the strength to grab the microphone and speak your truth, even when your voice is shaking. Her journey from heartbreak to architect of her own destiny is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments can become the blueprints for our greatest achievements. She didn't just get her life back, she built a better one from the ground up. What would you have done in Ava's shoes? If her story of resilience and rebirth inspired you, show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see that it's possible to build a beautiful life from the rubble, and subscribe for more tales of incredible strength. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.